Hello guys, and welcome back to another Tweaker Man video. So in this video I want to talk about parts and why they are important for getting the best sound quality out of your equipment. So those of you that have been following this channel for a while have noticed I've gone on this upgrade trend at the moment where I'm replacing capacitors inside my equipment to try to eke out more sound quality from them. And so far I've only really concentrated on electrolytic capacitors apart from the speakers that I built. Now the reason for this video is I get lots of comments saying parts don't make a difference, you're wasting your money, and it's mainly aimed towards the boutique parts. Now I think it's because they're very expensive, a lot of boutique parts, and they tend to be more low production, so the less of the run of them you make, the more expensive it becomes. That's why you've got the likes of Panasonic, Nichicon. Their capacitors tend to be a lot cheaper than the boutique ones, is because they mass produce them, and the boutique ones are done on a smaller run. But are the boutique ones worth the money? Now sometimes they can be quite a lot dearer, and I know on some forums and on Facebook groups opinions are split, but for me, I've tried a lot of these now, and I can say that the boutique ones do tend to be better in producing better sound quality than a lot of your standard capacitors. So I've got a few lined up here, and as you know, I'm in love with these audio note capacitors at the moment. So they do three ranges, but the two that I've concentrated on are the Capacitors. In fact, that is not the right way to pronounce this, but me being dyslexic, I struggle with pronunciations of certain words, and this is a difficult one. So I call it the Capacitors, and this is on the left here. And then in the middle here, we have Audio Note's standard electrolytic capacitor. Now, obviously, Audio Note don't make these capacitors. They're made by Rubicon, which are part of, or used to be part of, Blackgate, that made some very nice capacitors. And these Capacitors are based on the original Blackgate capacitor. So Audio Note have several ranges of equipment that they sell. If you haven't ever checked out Audio Note, check out their website. They do some fabulous equipment. Now in their free ranges, their cheaper ranges, they use their standard electrolytic capacitor, which is this, in all their free cheaper range. And when we're talking about cheaper range, we're not talking about Cambridge Audio's cheaper range. We're talking about from sort of £4,000 downwards, or somewhere around that. And in their free higher range equipments, they use this Audio Note Capacitors. Now, if you know anything about Audio Note, they get great reviews. All their equipment is fabulous. They really are top quality, high-end audiophile equipment. And with their great reviews, it's to do with the parts they use inside their equipment. So Audio Note's £10,000 amplifiers have the Capacitors in there. So when I first found this capacitor, I spoke to Nick at Hi-Fi Collective, and he told me they're the best on the market at the moment you can get. And then when I started looking at the Audio Note website, and checking out images, internal images of their amplifiers, they all use those Capacitors caps in there. Now, they make great equipment and they sound great and they get excellent reviews. And it's because of the parts they use in the equipment. Any equipment that uses cheap parts tends to sound not as good. And I know I'm probably going to get some pelters for this review, but this is true, of course. And yes, they are expensive, and I think the reason why they're more expensive is because they're low production, and I don't mind saying that. So this capacitor, this Capacitor one on the left there, works out to about, I think it's about £18. This one on the right here, which is their standard electrolytic capacitor, works out about £3.90. So there is a big difference, and the reason why is because Rubicon can produce this capacitor on the right hand side on their machinery that they produce other capacitors on. The one on the left is specially made, so it's low production, a lot more low production than the one on the right, and that is why they're more expensive. But the one on the left is a far better capacitor than the one on the right, even though the one on the right is still a very accomplished capacitor. Now, I know for a fact, Audio Note, I've read loads of reviews online of their products, and they wouldn't be using, or they wouldn't put their name to a capacitor if it wasn't good. And trust me, this isn't snake oil. I get loads of snake oil comments still when I'm on Facebook groups. I talk about Audio Note capacitors. People have never even tried them. They've just made their minds up. But it's true that parts do make a huge difference. So looking at these two, this is a sandcast resistor. And this is a Mundorf Supreme HP audio resistor. Now, there's a big difference in price here. Again, these sandcast resistors, I mean, I think this is a Jansen, but they whether they make them or whether another company makes them, they just add their name to them. That tends to happen in a lot of cheaper products. I don't know. But I had this one in my speakers at first, and then I had a few snotty comments. And don't forget, I'm on an audio journey like everybody else. I don't claim to know everything. All I'm doing is trying to tell you my experiences. And I don't get paid anything from these companies. I'm not trying to big these companies up because they're giving me freebies. I don't get no freebies, trust me. Not on the amount of subscribers I've got anyway. If I was on 100,000 or 200,000 subscribers, well, then I might. But on 5,200 or something like that, I'm not going to get any freebies. But as soon as I changed over to this Mundorf resistor, the sound just opened up for me. It was so much clearer and cleaner. I don't really say that I know everything, but that is just my experience. And yes, that is a lot more expensive, but it's worth it. So moving on to Nichicon, they make a great range of capacitors, loads of different capacitors, from the fine gold capacitor, which is at the lower level, and gradually working up different capacitors. Some are signal capacitors, some are power supply capacitors. Now this kg in the middle is one of them from the upgrade to the Roxanne K3 DAC that I've done. And I had to, it was cheaper for me to buy 10 of them than it was 9, so I bought 10, so I got one left over. And I thought that's great for this video. So when I was doing that upgrade as well, I had comments that power supply caps don't make a difference. It's only signal caps. Now, there is the truth in that is signal caps make a big difference. They are definitely the biggest improvement you can do. But after fitting these KG gold tune capacitors into my DAC, it just blew me away. The sound quality of that DAC just increased immensely, and I can't underestimate that. It was a pretty big improvement. So anybody that says that power supply capacitors don't make a difference are totally wrong. Now, Nichicon make a range of these, and the KG is their top one. But on the KG, they make a KG Mark 1, a KG Mark 2, and a KG Mark 3. And the Mark 3 one is the one you really want to get. It has gold-plated prongs to it as well, and another slight difference. Now, these ones are only the Mark 1, and I'm blown away by the Mark 1s. So I'm pretty happy. Now, I would have gone for the Audio Note Kaisa, but they were just very expensive. And but these are, I mean, I'm not entirely sure, but these are extremely well accomplished power supply capacitors. Now, you find the people that do the most upgrades are people that build speakers. If you're on Facebook and you're on some DIY speaker forums or groups, I should say, you've got people that are ScanSpeak lovers, and ScanSpeak make absolutely fabulous and excellent drivers and tweeters, and that will be another speaker build for me at some stage using all ScanSpeak. And I'd love to build a really high-end speaker, but you find on those groups that they all use really nice capacitors inside, from the likes of Mundorf, Julens, Janssen, loads of different makes. There's some really expensive capacitors, but they do make a huge difference. So I was using this capacitor here in my speaker at first. Okay, this is Janssen standard Z cap. So then after that, I upgraded to the Janssen Superior cap. I think it's a Superior Z cap. Oh, it was so much different. I mean, the sound stage opened up. The imaging was so much better. Just across the board, the mid-range become really lovely. It was a totally different ball game to those. Now, not to say that these were poor, in no way, you see. But unless you try something better, you'll never know. And I was, really pleased. And the beauty of doing a lot of these things yourself is you can save yourself vast amounts of money. You don't have to go and spend loads of money on a new amplifier. Like, so for instance, I've done the upgrade to the Quad 405, and I used all of these Kaisa capacitors inside them, and it wasn't cheap. The power filter caps worked out to about £120 each. Now, that is big bucks. And then I used all of the rest of these on the circuit boards, and I studied this Keith Snook's website on upgrading the Quad 405. But I'm always someone who likes to do something different to other people. I want to try new things. I don't always like going with the crowd. I think I can do this my own way and really get a good result. And that is what I've done. And I'd love to put my 405 up against one of the Keith Snook 405s that was done a while ago. And I'd be very surprised if the Keith Snook 405 sounded as good as mine using these Audio Note Kaisa caps. That is why I rate these caps so highly. Yes, they're expensive, but so I bought the 405 second hand from a chap that said that he had restored it, but it still had a slight hum in the background. There was still this little hum coming through the speakers. It was only slight, okay. And these were using BHC, is it? BHC capacitors on the power supply. And then they were using Panasonic FM capacitors, I think, on the board. So once I'd done the recapping of that, and I've replaced them with the Audio Note Kaisa caps, this amp is quiet. There's no hum at all. Just lowered the noise floor totally. And tonality changed for the better, so much for the better. Or just across the board, it changed. And another thing I was blown away by. So these capacitors, I think they turned out to cost around altogether, I think they was about £290, right? But I wouldn't get an amplifier that good if I spent £290. So altogether, £290 plus the £220 I think I paid for the 405. So what's that? £510, say. I'm not joking. You couldn't buy a modern amplifier, power amplifier, for £510 that would touch that amplifier. No way. This 405 has just gone to a whole new level. And I put the upgrade on one of the quad Facebook pages, and they're purists on there, quad purists, most of them, and they poo-pooed it like lots of people do. But do you know what? I don't care about that. I'm the one who's getting the benefit. And but these capacitors really have changed that 405 into a whole new level of detail. Now, I haven't even gone down the road yet of swapping out op amps. And when you go onto forums, lots of people have their different ideas about op amps, and there is some very expensive op amps out there. And I will be bringing you videos of me changing op amps at some stage. These are all things that I'm wanting to do slowly, but it takes time, and some of these products can be very expensive, and I have to bide my time just to get it past the wife. You know, it's terrible, really, but there we go. But and then we have transistors and all sorts of stuff. I mean, there's so many different parts inside an amplifier or a CD player, and it's like upgrading a clock. So I've ordered a new laser for the Sony XA9000ES SACD player. Hopefully it should come before the end of December. That's the shipping dates, around about the 29th. So that will be going into there, and I'll do a video on that as well. Now, that's not upgrading, that's just swapping like for like, because the old laser, I think, is wearing out, and it will just give this player a new lease of life. But I'd also like to do as you saw in the previous video, put a new clock in it, and to recap the Sony as well. Now, inside the Sony, they're using a lot of Silmic 2 capacitors, which on forums and on Facebook groups are very admired. They are very good capacitors. I'm not doubting that. Okay, but they are not the Audio Note Kaisa. So inside the Sony, there's a 3 boards in there, like I showed you before, which are sort of multi-channel boards. I'm not using those, so they've got a lot of Silmic 2 capacitors in there. I won't be touching them. I'm not going to be doing multi-channel listening. It's not my thing. I'm a 2-channel man, and that's how it is. But there's other capacitors in there, and I've looked into those. There's there's the Nichicon fine gold capacitors in there. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little story now. When I was doing the upgrade to the Quad 405, I used a Nichicon fine gold capacitor in there because I couldn't get an Audio Note Kaisa capacitor at the same rating as I needed. So I put one of those in there, and I listened to it. At first, I wasn't that impressed by it, so I spoke to Hi-Fi Collective, and they said, "Oh, I could use a slightly different rating, which the Kaisa had." When I swapped that over, wow! I tell you what, there was a big difference. Everything come to life. It was low with the Nichicon. It was like strangling the sound and making it slightly muffled sounding. But as soon as I changed it to the Kaisa, everything opened up and it was so much lusher, the sound. And so that's another reason, because the fine gold are like pence. Well, they're £1.20 or something. And they're mass produced, but that is not Nichicon's best signal capacitor. They've got other ones which are far superior. And then we move on to wiring, internal wiring. Now that can be changed, and that does. I know, again, the Snake Oil police will be on my case, saying wires don't make a difference. Now, if a capacitor can make a difference to the sound quality because the materials they use are better quality, there's no reason why wire can't be the same. And I know it does. I know it changes the sound quality. I've been building cables since the 80s. I've been building cables. Trust me, I made my first cables years ago, and I heard a difference. Yes, some things are more subtle than others, and I'll admit that. But it's like using a copper cable. So if you use a conductor of 0.8 mil of copper, and then you use a conductor 0.8 of silver, the pure silver conductor will just give you so much more high-end sparkle to the sound than the copper one does. It does. It's so much. In my eyes, it's better. It may not be better for you. I mean, the thing is, what I'll say about this hobby is try it. If you don't like it, then don't use it. Sometimes it costs money to trial and error things, but if you're building a set of pure silver interconnects, you can probably build a set for 50 quid. £50 for a set of pure silver interconnects. Okay, that is cheap. Do you know how much Russ Andrews and other companies charge out for pure silver interconnects? And then they put all this spin around them, and they charge you £2,000, £3,000, £4,000, £5,000 for a set of interconnects. That's crazy when you can build a set for around 50 quid yourself. And that's what we should all be doing in this great hobby of ours, experimenting. I do it all the time. I go to bed thinking about audio, okay, how I can improve things. I wake up in the morning thinking about audio and how I can improve things. I'm working in my job all day long thinking about audio and how I can improve things. And there's no doubt about it that parts is what makes a great piece of equipment. The better the parts, the better the sound quality. So if you ever follow Kevin Deal from Upscale Audio, he says the same things. He opens up amplifiers when he's doing his videos, and he shows you the insides of the amps or the disc player or anything that he's reviewing. And he likes a lot of Prima Luna stuff, and he shows you the quality that some of these companies use inside their equipment. And he says the same thing. Parts is what makes the difference. Of course, it is to do with the design. So you can design a good amplifier with cheaper parts. And it's been done loads of times. That's why you get these magazines, what Hi-Fi, Sound and Vision, Hi-Fi News, Hi-Fi World. They review amplifiers or a piece of equipment in there, and they'll rave about it. And it's done on a budget, right? Okay, but if you was to then take that piece of equipment, which has been well designed, and then replace all those parts with much superior quality parts, that there's no doubt about in my mind that piece of equipment will sound absolutely fabulous, far better than it did. So say the amplifier was £500 and it's been designed very well. There's no doubt about, by upgrading all the parts in that to higher end parts, that will sound so much better. So here we have the the other board out of the Lucid 405 there. There we go. So I'm using these Nichicon KG capacitors, the big ones on there. And the rest of them that I've put in there are the Audio Note Kaisa. Now there's other parts in here that can be changed as well, which I'm gradually getting onto. So these are made by Caddock, which are not a bad make actually. So I'm in, again, they are just relatively cheap. £2 something each. Now, Mundorf makes some of these, and their ones are meant to be absolutely great, and they're £15 each. So I'm going to need 4 of those because I've got 2 boards, and this is part of the Lucid 405 diaries, which is a video series I've been doing on my channel. And at the moment, it's come to a bit of a halt because I need to order some more parts. And I haven't got an endless pot of money. So I do a little bit a month. And that's the beauty of doing upgrades. You don't have to do everything at once. And you can just... So sometimes I get people saying... Because I might upgrade a few parts all at once. And they'll say to me, well, why didn't you just try those ones first to see what the difference was before doing all of them? But the problem is I don't like having to keep undoing the equipment and redoing it again. So what I tend to do is build up parts over a couple of months. Then I'll do the upgrade like I did with the Roxanne K3 DAC. So here I have other capacitors here, which are the Audio Note Kaisa that are going into the Roxanne K3 DAC. These are going to be replacing some of the surface mounted capacitors that are in there. So that video will come up soon, possibly over the Christmas period. I haven't had time to get on it, and I have to remove those surface mounted capacitors that I've tested them on other equipment, and I find the best way to do it is to remove them with 2 soldering irons, one on each side. And always use flux with it. The flux makes it so much easier to remove. So that is what I'll be doing soon. I think that's it for this video. I hope you get the gist of what I'm saying. And it's only my experience. As I say, I don't have any shares or anything in any of these companies. I don't get no freebies. I'm just saying what I hear and how you can improve your equipment. You've only got to learn how to solder. Soldering's not that difficult. To do it really well takes practice, and you can practice it. I always say to people, get an old piece of equipment. It could be an old Skybox you've got or an old Freeview box. Take it apart and just unsolder a part in there and then resolder it back in. Simple as that. Try not to overheat things too much. I mean, it's you can blow the pads on them, which on the circuit board, which is a pain after. I mean, it's easily fixed. You just got to trace it with a new piece of wire and that, which is fine. But yeah, always, you know, practice on something first. If you're not that confident, build your confidence up slowly and do it. I mean, I've been soldering parts out of equipment for years. I started off in the early 80s. Uh, I've said this before many times. I had my parents had this music centre, and I kept on recording onto a cassette tape from a vinyl record, and the recordings were awful. They were dull and lifeless, and I'd made my mind up that it was the tape heads in the tape deck on it. So I stripped this music centre down while my parents were out. I think it might have been. It wasn't a very expensive one. My dad was one person that never spent a lot of money on things like audio, and it was a very cheap unit. And so I had a stereo tape recorder. I think it was like a ghetto blaster. And I thought to myself, I know what I'll do. I'll desolder. So I stripped that down as well. I took the heads out of that and I soldered them into this. I think it was a mate called Fidelity. It was a very cheap music centre. And I thought, this is going to be great. This is what's going to do me really nice recordings. And it didn't. It sounded awful still. And the moral of the story was the stylus had worn out on the record deck. So I had to desolder that out, put that back in and desolder. Anyway, in the end it was, but do you know the funny part about it? I learnt a hell of a lot from just doing that. And that was in about 1985. That was a long time ago, with an old soldering iron with a bloody great large tip on the end. The soldering was absolutely atrocious, but I got there slowly, and I became a lot better at it. So I won't ramble on any more because we're into 32 minutes on this. But remember, parts. That's what makes your equipment sound better. Don't listen to the doubters. You need to try things. You need to solder stuff in and try it. I mean, some of the more expensive capacitors are expensive, and you have to be careful. Or perhaps start, when you're doing this hobby, to start on maybe using some slightly cheaper capacitors, or better than what you've got in your equipment. Like Nichicon, they do a really nice range of capacitors, so you can gradually work your way up until you get to the level that you're happy with. But anyway, I won't go on any more. So thanks for watching another Tweaker Man video. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to give this video a like. Don't forget to press that notification bell so you're notified each time I upload a new video. And thank you for watching, guys.